Because progress.
Oh yeah, let's just add more options and more buttons for people to click the wrong one. So, John, your video. I've seen a draft version of the video. Looks good. Let's discuss Obsidian Vault building.
Trying not to add more stuff is the bane of my existence. And it's trying to decide. When it's for me, I don't really care. I'm just like, yeah, I can deal with clunky stuff. I don't mind. But when I'm building something to share with others, I'm like, no, I don't want this to be clunky because it's kind of pointless. And if you don't set it up in the right way, or you're not clear on what you're trying to achieve, you get real big clunk, which was
Yes.
last week's issue. And trying to one figure out when to stop because literally I don't know what time it was last night. I just literally last night I found out that freaking metadata menu had updated.
The update came out like 2 days ago though.
Yeah, I know. Well, I was too busy trying to change it.
See, that right there is why so when I'm talking about function inside of Obsidian, data view and metadata menu are the first two that I install. Quick add's
Yeah.
normally the third.
Mm.
But when I'm looking to make a template or well inside my vault obviously, I make sure I have plugin update tracker because while I'm building out the vault, if an update comes out, I see the number. Otherwise, I don't see the number. Then I do put out the template, and then I realize, damn, there was an update. Didn't see that. Um,
I had to have blinkers. I literally was just like, right, don't look at anything. Don't talk to Danny because I know Danny will find something. Oh, Danny's got a new video. No, just no. I'm gonna get this thing done this week. And then I was like, okay, cool. Oh, this is completely broken. I'm gonna have to change everything. And that was yesterday afternoon.
see, you could have asked me to help troubleshoot because I mean, half of my job is troubleshooting Obsidian vaults that don't work.
What was annoying is I knew what was wrong. It was just the amount of I had to refactor everything because basically I had it set as a data view, like look up to find the file links, which worked previously. But since adding this tiny feature, which basically streamlined everything and made it usable and user friendly, I had to change it to a name because the links didn't work and it was weird and it didn't like it was just dodgy.
Yeah. I think that's one of the limitations with data view because it is so flexible. If you do change something, it needs to be quite specific. Like data view queries need to be quite specific on what it shows, which is where you end up fiddling. Oh, I need to do this query now. I need to change the query like this now, which means the way data view works. One of the reasons why I'm really enjoying the metadata menu for like inline query stuff because like even though it doesn't have the flexibility that data view has, and I can do more with data view queries, the metadata menu ones just give me all the basic things. It gives me all the basic queries that I need with the classes. It gives me the ability to tick boxes off and move priorities and drop down stuff. Like, it gives me all the simple stuff that I would need.
Yeah.
All the complicated data view queries are still there if I want them, but I don't need to. So if, for example, in your case, if I do change something, I don't need to change all of their data view queries because metadata menu just updates itself.
Yeah, I cannot wait to switch them all over because most of my queries aren't going to need to be data view. They can just be
I,
MDM.
I assume it's like from whatever folder and then where class equals this thing and then
Yeah, it's literally type is this or this. That's probably the most complicated part.
yeah, which is obviously just a filter inside of a column, which metadata menu now has, which is lovely. Yeah. So when it comes to your actual Vault build itself, obviously you're still going through it. You have the build that is focused on Dungeons and Dragons. So it's focused on D&D and playing the game. When it comes to the plugins behind it, obviously some of them you need, some of them you don't need, as in need to do it the way that you do it. and some of them you don't need. How did you decide what plugins to include, what plugins not to include, and how much of the complexity have you brought over from your vault?
Most of it. So in terms of how much complexity I brought over, the thing with Dungeons and Dragons is because it's a world that's living and you're in multiple places at once, it's so tough to like figure out. One of the things that I struggled with early on with making the video itself is how do I lead people through it?
Hmm.
And I remember asking you about that last week because it's like I could take when I come in, I do multiple different things at once. I'm often doing a little bit of world building, a little bit of party stuff, and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. The main stuff that I needed was data view for sure. I suppose I wouldn't have to have file folder as a plugin if I was happy to have duplicates, but I kind of like the being able to click on the folder and it opens up the markdown file of the same name. I like that. I didn't used to have that. It used to be a separate file. But then once I started renaming things and it just got messy really quickly. So being able to just right click, rename the folder and it renames the file, super just nice. So I think metadata menu is an absolute that has to be in there. Otherwise, everything is just rubbish. It takes such a long time and is clunky because, as you saw in the video, there are a lot of bits of information, lots of data to put in. Data view, obviously, metadata menu. I mean, I'm wondering whether, well, I do need data view because of metadata menu, but yeah, so metadata menu, data view. I took and for this video anyway, stripped out the wiki and I didn't talk about the dungeon files purely because they're still fairly new and I've just started using them. So I want to play with them first. So I have another video to record as well. Once I have used the dungeon page in a couple of games, because all of this other stuff I've been using for a while. Because I run a lot of D&D.
Obviously, you use Quick Add and you use buttons. Both of those plugins are in the Vault as well. I assume you use buttons because you like just clicking on things.
Yeah, and it's also easier to demonstrate. It's in many ways I have commander and buttons. I
Right.
like the buttons because when I like clicking stuff, and commander does a lot of it too. I suppose I could remove buttons. Yeah, I could
I
even
mean,
remove quick add.
well, yeah, you can remove Quick Add. That's
I could
interesting.
do. Oh, actually, wow. I don't have the setup I have for quick add right now in my
Oh,
own. I created that for this video because otherwise, oh, create a page, put a template in, do this. I'm like, oh, this is so much effort. So as I was building this file, I was like, oh, I wonder if I could do this. Usually I'm just like, I'm planning my session. So I don't have time to Notion as
yeah.
such, where I'm just trying to build extra stuff in and extra features. I'm like, oh, I might actually put this. So I'm going to put a dungeon thing in, create a blank class, fill it out later. And then I go and play later on if I want to update my vault. Um, but yeah, I don't have the quick add. I'm going to be adding it now because oh my gosh, it makes my life so much easier. So I actually think quick add would be a necessary plugin as well because it just being able to filter the parties rather than what I have in my current vault when I add a session or a journal or an NPC. I had to write out the name of the folder or file, which just was stupid.
Yeah. So when you say you had to write it out, as in when you create a new file, you had to write the name of the actual file out.
Yeah, so it actually asked which party is this for, and it was just text versus which party is this for, multi-select,
Right. Right.
which uses the field syntax on QuickAdd, which is amazing. I found that midweek and I was like, right, everything. That's the thing that made me have to change everything.
Okay, why? Because that should just be adding in field information, shouldn't it?
Yeah, but I had some field information that was a linked page and some of it that was name. And when it was a link,
Right.
it created a folder which had the the,
Brackets
the
around.
brackets around it, which looked stupid and it bugged me and it was annoying. I could have still
Yeah.
released it probably earlier as it was, but I was just like, no, it looks stupid. I wouldn't want to use this vault.
Yep. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. When it comes to actually using the vault itself, have you tried doing like a mock run through to make sure all the buttons and all the things work?
Oh yeah, yeah. I did a mock run through and I was like, cool, this feels good. This feels nice. I like this. And then I recorded it and found like hundreds of errors.
See, that's where when I'm recording, I I mean most of the time because of the amount of times I've built vaults, I don't have many issues now,
Oh yeah.
but when I started, I had lots of small things that I just forgot. So I'd made a template for one of the things, but not finished off the other templates. Or I'd made the quick add with the template, but I'd left the duplicate template in there, so it was using the wrong ones, those sorts of things. So when I was going through and recording the video, I didn't bother cutting it out. I just carried on recording and I just didn't say anything. So I know with the audio that nothing's
Mhm.
going on. So when I'm cutting the video, this is like editing behind the scenes sort of thing. When I'm cutting the video, I only cut to the audio. If I'm not saying anything, I know there's nothing on screen that's relevant. So I just cut it all out. And that
Yeah, so
saves me having to go back and do the audio. Yeah.
I did three videos, three takes of that. And the first two was me trying to pause it and then restart and then pause it and then restart and like and then in the end, the last one, the one that you saw is just me pressing record and then for sake, when there were errors, they're just like, right, fix the errors, fix the template, continue. It is very different. It was quite hard to just shut up and just go, okay, cool. What am I saying next? Where do I? One of the hard parts of this video was the packaging and how to. Where do I take people? Because obviously, and I think I did an okay job here. I'm fairly happy with what I've got. Where it's like, okay, cool, create a party. Okay, you've got a party. Let's create a PC. Let's add their information. Oh, okay. Now they need to have a home location. Let's build and it felt like it flowed quite nicely. So they could just skip to the. My idea will be they'll be able to skip to the section that they want and not have to. Because that is the hard part. Because when I'm doing it in D&D, I'm just like, okay, cool, allocation, NPC, boom, 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 and not really thinking about the flow of it because I'm in the flow of the D&D thing, not the video. So trying to figure out the package of like take from here to there. And there was so much I didn't talk about.
But that right there is what I do. Like I don't speak through the video as if this is a video. I speak through the video as if I was explaining it to someone. So if I'm on a call, I would explain it to you. Oh, I do this because of this, and then I use this button to do this. I use that button to do that. I make sure I can see these things because this piece of information here is important to me. So when I'm working like this, bring up another screen, I then do X, Y, Z. That's how I go through the video and explain it because when I think I mean looking at education, learning, whatever it is you're talking about, saying something in an abstract term because it's a presentation takes out the practical application of whatever it is you're talking about. When I'm looking at sport, when I'm looking at physical movements and activities, if you explain it, well, great, I know that I'm going to move my arm 90 degrees to the right. What does that mean? Why are you doing that? I'm moving it like this because now I'm getting in the way of the player that's running at me. Oh, okay, that makes sense. So when explaining the vault in practice, you can say, okay, I'm going to, for whatever it is, I'm going to start out building the vault, but you're not building the vault because it's already been built. So put it into practice. I'm going to show you how I use this vault in practice. I will go in and I will look at the party. What party am I working with? Or what world am I working in? That's the world I'm working in. Oh, these are the other worlds that I have that are being shown through this query. Click on query. Okay, there's the query. So I'll go into the world. Then inside of the world, then go through whatever it is that you would do in practice. Because if there's something not shown when you go through practice, I would argue it's redundant.
Mm,
If you have to go out of your way to explain something that's not in practice, then it's not needed. And this is something that I've seen inside of education as well. With lessons, teachers that I've seen, or some teachers that I've seen doing their mock lessons, they're sort of like, this is how you teach, blah, blah, blah. Uh, I watch their lessons and I sit here and think, you're explaining it because it's on the learning outcomes and you're explaining it because it's on the syllabus. But if you were to go and do the practice examples, then they wouldn't learn it. If the student doesn't learn something because it's not in the practical examples, either the practical examples are bad for the learning outcomes, which, I mean, if the teachers come up with it, they shouldn't be bad, or the piece of information that you're going out of your way to teach them isn't relevant. Whether
mm.
it's relevant in future, that's another question. But if it's in future, then that's a lesson for another time.
That that was something when I first started kind of mapping this out before we spoke last week. I was like, okay, cool. Explain how it works, go into the details, go into the nitty-gritty, because that's the fun stuff. Because that's like the nerdy, geeky stuff which you see all over YouTube of like, I use this to do that. And I was like, cool, explain all of the properties and explain all of this. And I'm like, this is boring.
Yes. That's why
And
I don't
not
do many of those videos.
and it's not practical either, as you were saying. So it was really good to me going, okay, cool. What would people do if they had the vault? That's kind of how I thought about it. It's like, what would people do? So this is a tutorial on the vault, not on how I do it, but it also is how I do it.
Yep. That's how I personally pitch it because most people on YouTube at least that are looking up for Obsidian content, Obsidian videos, they know what Obsidian is. Yes, you'll need to explain very briefly, this is a file, this is a folder, this is the ribbon. So the terminology things for those that are unfamiliar, but everyone that's inside the Obsidian community recognizes that, oh, okay, yeah, we need to explain what these things are because it's not the same as all the other apps. But when
Mm.
you go into the actual vault, you don't need to explain that, oh yeah, I'm using the curly brackets select syntax inside of the quick add because that's how the quick add plugin works. No one cares. They just care that when you push the either the button or the icon on the ribbon or the hotkey, it comes up with a drop-down menu. Cool. Great.
Yeah, and that was the first like real. Oh, cool. I don't have to talk about the details of this stuff.
Nope. The only time I talk about the details and talking about specific pieces of information is if it fundamentally changes a function in the way that I work. So when I'm talking about metadata menu as an example, I will go in and say, oh yeah, I've got a drop-down menu. This drop-down menu is a multi-list. This drop-down menu is a multi-link list. The difference here is a link. I can click in it and then move somewhere else. So that's a function of metadata menu. There is a list and then there is a link list, multi and single. I need to be able to say why I'm using the different things. I don't need to
Mm,
then explain the rest of the fields because no one cares about that. They don't know that the update canvas group is going to change inside of a canvas because I haven't explained that. Uh, so I'm explaining the nuances and specific information related to that practice rather
yeah,
than here's all the information that I have because no one cares.
yeah. And it was definitely interesting to try. So I think it was like 50 minutes of recording, and I've now, since speaking with you and hearing what you had to say, I've got it down to just under 9 minutes, and I'm like, that's actually not bad.
I mean, my videos typically are about 40 minutes of recording and I cut it down to about 15, 20 minutes.
Mm.
But obviously I've been doing this a long
Oh yeah,
time. So
oh, yeah,
I'm pretty good at one, making the vault so it doesn't have many mistakes to start with now. And also when I stop, I can work out where I'm going to go next much quicker than I could previously.
mm.
But even saying that, I will have some videos where I record for an hour and the video end up being like 10 minutes because of errors, mistakes, or things that I'm trying to troubleshoot as the recording's just going.
Yeah. There was a lot of that. I was like, wait, why is that not showing up? Wait, why is that not showing up? Wait, why is that not showing up? Oh, for goodness. Okay, cool. Why? Let's go and check why. Okay, cool. Now let's go and change the tablet to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, there were things during the live stream that I did yesterday, the last live stream of 2023, because coming into the new year. But I was going through that live stream and there were areas where I was like, is this a bug? Do I need to refresh something? Have I just completely forgotten something? Because as you're building through, there are so many things when you're building the vault from scratch. There are so many things that you know you've done before, but it's
Mm,
whether you've done it in this vault. It's like,
mm.
I know I have this feature, or I know I created this feature. Have I created this feature here? And when you push
Yeah.
a button, you think, oh, yeah, then it will show me this list. Oh, it didn't show me the list. Why didn't it show me the list? Damn, I need to troubleshoot.
Yeah, one of them that I ended up just not having in there because for some reason it wasn't working at that moment in time was the leader thing for guilds. So I don't remember. I don't think I put the guilds and groups in there in this video.
I just realized something that yesterday on the live stream I said that I was going to filter in the query, but I didn't filter in the query and it's not in the vault either, so I'm going to have to add that. Like
I know that feeling. I'm just like, oh, yeah, there's another thing. Yeah, there were so many things that in the end I was just like, right, I need to get this video done. Otherwise, we're going to have absolutely nothing to talk about.
what the thing is though, a video can always be added to. There's always something you can add in Obsidian in any of these note-taking apps because it's dynamic. The way we work is dynamic, and there's always things you can add, you can change, you can manipulate in some other way, which is why when I make a video, I say I'm going to make a video, I do a rough outline point, then I make the template, and once I've made the template, I record the video on that template. I then don't add to it. And what I've actually found is when you add two things, the video then becomes too long or too complicated, too convoluted for people to really understand what it is you're talking about, which is why I have a media video for my movies, a media video for my library. They could be in the same video, but they're not. Then I have the food tracker, which again I released on Friday. I then have the main projects and research stuff, which was the live stream I built yesterday. That is a big bulk of my vault, but there are loads of small sections like the Zotero integration. That's another individual video. I could do it all in one, but it would be probably a 3 hour long video of me building the stuff, which people don't want to go through all that.
Yeah, yeah. It was definitely interesting to record the whole video itself. I'm just like, okay, cool. And also, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning.
I did notice when you sent me the message, I was like, are you going to record it now? Like, that's going to be.
Yes, because otherwise it would not have been done. So I was like, right, I'm recording it. I'm recording it. It's 11:30. So it might have been later. I'm just like, I'm going to record it. And then I'm going to very quickly edit it. And then I'm going to go sleep.
Yep. I think when it comes to the actual video itself with the edit, I mean, what you've got now works fine. For me personally, looking at the video going through, I mean, it might be you, it might have been the time you were on it, or it might have just been like the way you cut it. It looks very much here's a bit, here's a bit, here's a bit, here's a bit sort of thing, rather than yeah, your face just says yes, that's what I did. Rather
Pretty
than
much.
rather than going through the story. Obviously, what we were discussing here, going through like this is how I would start, and then even though I don't think much will change with the video when it comes to what's actually being shown, I think the words you choose to use will change.
Yeah, one thing I want to do is re-record it because I had, as I was going through, and I could publish what I've got now, and it'd be fine. A little bit of intro, a little bit of out, leave comments, blah 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 blah. But I do now that I've recorded the first draft. I'm like, okay, cool. I now know what I want this to look like.
Hmm.
Like it's I've attuned to that. I'm like, cool. So I know I'm because when I started recording, I was going to go from start to finish. So this is my vote and blah blah blah. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to do that because I also don't quite know what this video is going to be yet. I knew it was going to be talking about D&D, but I didn't know the extent of how deep I was going to go into it because, as I was saying, I could have gone in so many different directions because there were so many options. I could have created one of the dungeons. I could have talked about the wiki. Like there are features that I've just added into my vault, which of course are new and fresh for me, so are more interesting for me. And I'm like, no, because that's not actually relevant right now. And I don't know whether I'm even going to keep that. Let's talk about the stuff I know is working, optimize it minutely, maybe a tiny lot bit. Um, but now going back to my vault, I'm like, I need that button. Like the button.
I mean, bringing this back to ecological psychology and ecological dynamics, because that's obviously partly what we talk about. The philosophy behind all of this stuff is that you learn through practice what you
Mm,
wanted to do.
yeah,
You did the thing and you realized, oh, I should be doing this and I want to be doing that. So it's not you started in the wrong place. That's where I think some people would think, oh no, I need to do this again. I started in the wrong place or I didn't do this right. And think about all the things that they made mistakes on. Yes, they were mistakes, but they were mistakes you made because you started. If you hadn't started, you wouldn't have made the mistakes and you wouldn't know what to do now. Which is
yeah,
where the "oh, just get started or just do it" sort of motto is useful, but it's useful if you understand why it's useful. There is no
yeah,
wrong place to start. There's
yeah.
just action, like going
Just
through
do
action.
it.
Yeah. Going through action, perceiving what you need, what you don't need, and learning as you go, as you act, as you behave. So now moving forward, because it is continuous, you when you do the re-recording, because as you say, you're more attuned to the information that you want to focus on, you want to highlight, because you have greater expertise in the vault that you've built now, you can do it, I would imagine, quicker and more succinctly in your explanations, explaining where, why, what is going on, rather than fumbling away around. But that's you gaining expertise through action, through behavior in that vault, which other people won't have, which is obviously ecological dynamics in a nutshell.
It was really interesting to record it after so long of just like, okay, cool. I want to get this vault perfect. I want to get this vault right. Oh, I know it's nonsense. But I also it's also trying to like figure out which bit was me just perfectionism, blah blah blah, and which was actually I have a responsibility as a creator in this situation to provide value, to provide that, weird
Mm.
value word, but to provide something that's actually usable. And as I was going through the vault, I was like, I mean, oh, do I add these things? Do I not add these things? Okay, I will. And the question that you said, I think either in the session or afterwards was, is this important? It's like, is this necessary? It's like, yes, that is, because this is too clunky right now. And so changing a few of those things, although it meant I had to remake most of the things and redo things and change things and adapt things and all that stuff, it feels like it was much more worth it so that I could release something that I was like happy with.
When you say value, I'm curious what you mean by that, because when obviously value to me is in the eye of the person perceiving the information being given.
When I say value, I'm referencing if I was to produce a video and create a video and a vault that I would be happy with, that I would be that I would want to watch and want to use.
Right.
If I was new and starting again, would I use this?
Okay. Because that's you putting yourself in someone else's shoes, which obviously is what all of us do when we're trying to predict anything that's not our
Oh
own
yeah,
actions. But because for me, when I'm making a video, I'm thinking about the potential inspiration rather than value. I don't like using the term value because it's so vague, and
yeah.
just yes, there is meaning behind vague words,
Mm.
but but the meaning is very diminished when you're trying to apply it into a situation. And I know this is going to be a very like left turn direction for the moment, but I got an email response by a creator talking about neurodiversity and ADHD and that stuff, because I sent them an email a while back before the video that I did on it, the video essay I did on it. And they were saying that just because a word is vague doesn't mean there isn't meaning behind it. Every word has meaning. And I agree. Yes, every word has meaning. But if the word is vague, applying the meaning becomes extremely difficult, if not impossible, because it is so vague and applies blanket across situations. And to me, value is far too vague.
Mm. I think inspiration is a better word for what I mean.
Mm. Because when
Yeah,
I think
it's
about when I think about inspiration, inspiration to me, meaning behind it to me, is I've shown them a feature or a function or something that's possible that they might want to use.
mm,
Value could be, yeah, this is valuable because it looks cool.
mm,
Great. Is that useful? I don't know. Or this was entertaining. Or this distracted me from doing something else. Is that a positive value or a negative value? Well, it's still
mm.
valuable. Yeah, but that's not the intention I had with the video. I don't want you to go, oh, you're building out your vault. Come look at my video now. This is valuable. No, it's not. There's no positive value there. It's valuable to me because obviously I'm getting the view from it and potentially 2p. Um, but is it valuable to them? Again, the word is just too vague for me.
Mm. Yeah, I think I like the inspiration better.
It's
And I
what I
think
use. Maybe find your own word, be individualized.
no, just copy it, it's fine.
Just chat GPT it. Synonym
Yeah,
for inspiration.
yeah. Yeah, it was very like I knew I had something like if to break down what I was doing in the vault and to be able to do that using all the features available to me. I was underusing what I had because it was my stuff. I was just like, yeah, I'm getting on with it. But when it came to providing that and actually because I had it all in my, I suppose I had it all in my head, and I was practiced in that. I didn't necessarily need all the buttons and the shiny pieces because I knew where I was creating the folder and I knew I was doing this and I knew how that was happening. It just took a bit longer, and that was fine. But when it came to,
So, are you creating the video for other people, or are you creating it to share what you've done? Because what it sounds like is you had a vault setup that worked for you, and then you changed it and adapted it because other people might not like it.
I think it was partly that, but also because there were like, ooh, I could improve this here when I was in a different because it was a different environment I was in, I could start from scratch and go, oh, cool, I could do this differently. This is if I was to build it again from scratch, this is what I would do.
Right.
So yes, probably a bit of both.
Yeah, because my I started making videos for other people, um, and I moved away from that purely because it wasn't beneficial to me.
Mm.
And yes, content creation is meant to be helping other people, blah, 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 whatever. If you're going to consistently do something, you got to do it for yourself.
Oh yeah.
I believe that you need to be selfish in what it is that you do. Otherwise, you're not going to do it consistently. If you don't do it consistently, then there's not going to be value moving forwards. There's going to be less impact, less expertise, less help moving forwards if you don't do it consistently, because that's the way learning education works. If it's not consistent, it's not a behavior, and you don't consistently move forwards because it's not a consistent behavior. So when I'm looking at the vaults that I build, it's for me. Why do I want to build this? Why do I want to show you this? I show people the vaults that I build because, hey, look, I did this really fun thing, this really cool thing, and it works like this for me. And if it doesn't work for them, I'm happy with that because not everyone is going to work the same way I
Yeah,
work.
I don't think I would I think it was also a reason of like if I was to build this again, what would I do differently? Because I started from Josh Plunkett's
Plunkett.
vault and his one. And then I'm like, and then as I have Justin, I actually checked before I recorded it. I was like, okay, cool. How different is this vault? Because of course I'm not attuned to the differences at all. I was just like, this is Josh's vault. And so as I went back and looked at the differences between the two, and I'm like, oh, oh, these are basically almost unrecognizable as I restart. And I think that was like the change of the environment in a new vault where I was like, okay, cool. I now know exactly the pieces that I do. I have that expertise in how I use Obsidian to run my D&D sessions. If I was to start again, which is so refreshing and so nice to do, because you're just like, okay, cool, I'm going to build it now. What would I do differently? What did I wish I had that I haven't added in? So it was for me.
Yeah.
Upon reflection, it was for me because it's like, cool, now I'm going to take everything I've done here and put it in my vault. Because I'm like, yes, I love this now. Like all the thing that I loved, I already had all the metadata menu stuff. That was great. I'm happy with that. That's good, lovely, whatever. But what was exciting for me was the quick add functionality because I could pre-assign it to a party. I can even I can quickly make a new party. So if I'm running a new campaign, I just have to use a shortcut and I can create a new campaign. And it creates all the folders, creates the first player character, does all of the pieces for me, and I don't have to think. Whereas before I was manually doing it myself and just going through and blah blah blah. Then I forgot stuff. I
Who
know.
manually does stuff in Obsidian? God.
Me, because it's just but that was something as I was rebuilding, I was like, okay, cool. What do I do all the time that is just the mundane stuff that I don't really enjoy doing, but I do because I'm just maintaining the vault. I want something where if I was starting again, I could just press a button and it does it for me. And so I then explored that, figured out all of that, and went, cool, this is how I do it. Now I look at my vault. Let's go.
Yep.
But yes, it was absolutely, completely selfish and kind of cool.
That's kind of what I was hoping.
Yeah,
Because
because I was like,
I don't want to
good.
see another, hey, this is how you use Obsidian Vault. I want to see a, this is how I use Obsidian Vault.
Mm, yeah,
So
yeah. I was so happy. I am happy with the first, like knowing now what I know through acting on it instead of just continuing to tweak it forever. Not that I did that, of course.
well, I mean, in probably 2 or 3 weeks' time in the new year, you'll be like, oh, I learned this and I learned that, and I'll add this and I'm going to add that. And that's what the channel can then be. Or your channel, and you just, here's what I added to, here's what I added to, because that's what my videos are. It's
Yeah,
this is what I did, this is what I found out, this is what I learned. Even the plugins that I explore. Hey, I explored this plugin. It looks really cool. I do all of this, but this little feature over here, I've actually now recreated in my vault with another plugin because I don't like this one. But it's a nice, again, inspiration for learning. Maybe people do want to drop what they're using and pick up the new plugin, or they're going to make their own version of whatever feature that they found in their own vault.
and it's interesting because I have an online group right now who are complete and utter nerds. They'll be very happy with me saying that, but they have dived into D&D and they've dived in the deep end. They're like, I want a wiki for the whole world that we've created and all of the cat. I'm like, cool. How are we going to build it? And there were two options: Notion, obviously, and
Yep.
Obsidian. And I'm like, well, I'm already kind of in Obsidian. So that would be the quickest because I can quite literally copy and paste non-spoilery information into a vault. And it would be really quick. And then they're like, I introduced it, and it turned out two of them were already in Obsidian.
Oh,
And I'm like,
lovely.
yes, we're going in Obsidian. And then the other one was in Notion. Um,
Ooh.
and so it was that was actually quite a tough choice because it's like Obsidian is free, but the syncing you either use a Google folder or a Google Drive, and I'm like, yeah, but I can just use my sync vault and sync with them, and that's fine because I already have that,
Mm.
and I already have everything else as well. I was like, yeah, cool, I'll do the sync vault, or we could use Notion, which I could use, but given what I like with Obsidian and how the world is dynamic and building over time, I would hate it within minutes.
I was going to say, with Notion, looking at the features that you have inside of the vault that you've built, would you be able to do all of those things inside of Notion? Because the way I'm thinking about it at the moment, if you add a file or add a page inside of Notion, you would. need to use a template to make it automatically go into one. I don't know whether because you'd need a database of all the files, because obviously you need properties on the information. Obsidian, every file can have properties. In Notion, it has to be in a database for it to have a property.
I'd have to have so many flipping databases.
That's what I'm thinking. Either you'd need a massive database with so many properties, or you'd need to have a few different databases that are related backwards and forwards.
I'd have to have tiny databases, which would bug me. I'd have
Yeah.
to have like an NPC database. I'd have to have like a journal database, party database, a player database. Ugh.
I mean, I think it would be doable, but
Oh, it's doable, but it's
when you add a
annoying.
new file, you wouldn't be able to click on like a quick add button or a hotkey or something and just add it. You'd need to actually go to the database.
Not anymore, but they do have buttons now.
Would- Yeah, but you'd
But
need to
that's
like direct
not
the button to
something.
the database, wouldn't you?
Yeah, yeah, it's horrible. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then when it comes to the formulas, formulas inside of Obsidian that we discussed, are you still using them or
Formula, yes,
the calculations? Sorry, not.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, because obviously you can do that in Notion and people will say, oh, you can do like formulas in Notion. And I'm like,
Yeah, so can I in Obsidian.
yeah, just different
And they're
language.
better as well.
Really?
I don't know.
I was going to say, I would imagine Notion formulas are probably better because of they've built out an entire syntax for the formulas and all the rest of it. Whereas
That's true.
Obsidian is just JavaScript, so you'd need to know how to code.
So many hours.
Yeah.
Ah,
But the basic formulas are really nice, and the metadata menu filters are JavaScript, but it's very similar to data view. So the custom filters again, I feel like if you know how to code in Obsidian, you can do literally anything you want. Whereas in Notion, if you can learn the formulas, you can do a lot, but you can't use it outside of Notion. Sort of like
yeah,
Excel formulas. You can
yeah,
learn Excel formulas, but you can't use it outside of Excel. Whereas Obsidian, if you learn it in Obsidian, you can use it outside of Obsidian. Like
yes,
I use Markdown outside of Obsidian. I
yeah,
use all the command stuff outside of Obsidian because it works in browsers. And when you learn JavaScript, obviously you can use that outside of Obsidian as well. Same with CSS. So it's a learning environment that helps you develop skills that are applicable outside of the application itself as well, which is a nice side effect, I guess you could say. But Notion, I think formulas are more powerful because it's built into the app.
I guess. But it does use similar syntax now. It's closer to JavaScript.
Well, it's JavaScript on the back end. I know that because some of the bugs that
Got
I
a bunch of
found,
features. Yeah.
yeah, some of the bugs that I found in Notion right at the start with formulas, they were saying, "Oh yeah, that's a JavaScript issue," with like going between the two because it's pages, and it's the same with Obsidian because it's pages. JavaScript was getting confused with the symbols and the icons inside of the formula syntax, and so, oh yeah, JavaScript doesn't read it like this because JavaScript's different, and our created syntax tries to simplify it. Which I'm like, okay.
I just Obsidian.
Yeah, yeah. I do want to discuss something very sideways.
Oh, let's go sideways.
Uh,
Whee!
yeah. When I so I've been looking into the learning techniques, tip, trick, hacks stuff.
Oh dear.
Uh, yeah, that's all around because obviously they're the theories, ideas, concepts that's spoken about. And everyone that talks about them obviously talks about them through cognitive psychology and talks about working load, cognitive load, working memory, and schemas and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, great, fine. That's your perspective. My perspective is different. I have a different approach. When I'm looking at the techniques and I see the techniques explained, I feel like I could explain all of the techniques through an ecological approach, but it would almost fundamentally change the way that it's applied in practice. So I was listening to Justin Sung talk to the author of Ultra Learning. I don't remember the guy's name. I think it's something Scott. Can't remember. But yeah, the guy that wrote the book Ultra Learning, it's about, well, learning, the one that popularized the Feynman technique in their book, and then discussed all the other stuff. I don't fundamentally disagree with the theory that they talk about because the theory is based on cognitive psychology, but I do fundamentally disagree with the philosophy that they use to explain the techniques, the concepts. So, I guess my question to you would be, when it comes to someone that is viewing the techniques for the first time and they hear of a technique, whether it is free recall or retrieval practice or space repetition or interleave practice or the hypercorrection effect or the halo effect or literally any other thing inside of educational science, how would you suggest, argue for, argue against people learning what it means in practice, like how to apply the technique or thing in practice?
How would I argue that?
Yeah, the reason I ask, to give a little bit of context and for you to have some space to think about your answer, uh, is when I hear people explain the concept, the topic, the idea, the thing, oh, the hypercorrection effect is this thing. You need to apply it like this, or you can apply it like this, or this is how it works. Most of that coming through cognitive psychology explanations seems very constrained in the way that they discuss it. It's this is an effect that happens in this situation, and you can use it by doing this technique. That seems to be the explanation. When you
Mm.
do this technique, you're using the whatever effect.
Do this thing to make this happen.
Yeah, it's very much sort of programming, put input, put in input,
Get
get in
output.
output.
Magical processing thing in the middle.
Precisely. Input, process, output. That's how I see a lot of these effects explained,
Mm.
which is why I don't like them.
Yes.
It's not I don't like the effect or the phenomena or the thing that's been observed, because it's something that's been observed. There is science behind it. But when you say, yeah, carry on.
This kind of goes. So, as I've been ruminating over the last couple of weeks and just thinking about stuff, I've been watching, listening, consuming people's content and ideas and suggestions. And I'm like, so much of what's being said is obviously from a cognitive approach. And I'm just like, okay, fine. Let's pretend all these assumptions are true that you've made. How could, and I think I've been doing exactly what you've done. How could I explain this from this philosophy of like, what does this actually mean in practice? It's like, oh, we have X type of this, and we have, and of course, the neurodiverse space is something that I'm in a lot. It's like, oh, object impermanence and all of these. I'm like, okay, cool, fine, okay, fine, fine. Yes, these are real struggles, but what do we do? Like, like, what's next? And one of the things that I've been trying to do with my clients, for just tech stuff, it's like everyone struggles with the tech and it's overwhelming and there's so many options and there's so many things that can happen. And I'm doing a Notion build for someone right now. And I think, right, okay, cool. So I could just throw a bunch of stuff at them or do everything for them, or put them in an environment and see them play and then build around them. And it's been really interesting seeing that approach. Because usually when I build a system, I'm like, okay, cool. Here is a thing. Go use that thing. But when I started to just step back a tiny little bit, just a little bit, and I watch what they're doing, they're like, okay, cool, they're interacting with that. Right. That means I'm going to react like this. They're setting up their projects in this certain way. Okay, cool. Let me adjust this and constrain the environment to provide that opportunity for them to continue. And then they continue, they add more. Okay, cool. What happens if I do this? Boop, and move that there. And even in a very highly constrained environment like Notion, it was interesting to take this different approach because I hadn't been. Very much it's the prescriptive, do this, then that. But that is in exact like opposition to everything that I talk about. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm not going to just tell you what to do. I'll
It
provide an environment for you to play in. And then when you come back with questions, I'll probably come back with questions too.
it sounds to me that you've applied the constraints-led approach to, I guess, Notion consulting,
Yeah.
which for me is exactly what I'm thinking when I look at a lot of these techniques that
Mm,
we alluded to. It's not that the technique doesn't work. It's that when
yes.
you apply the technique in a certain way, typically it's done via instruction, direct instruction, DI. And when it's done through direct instruction, for some learners, that may be beneficial. But for a lot of learners, it's so constrained that that's all they learn. And if that's
Mm.
all you want them to learn, fine, great, do it.
And this is what I see from like if you look at the neurodiverse space, they've just learnt it this way. They've learnt that this is the behavior they should output because they are not doing this correctly or not this or not that. I'm just this, I'm just that. And one of the things that I've always found is just like that frustrates me. Like,
Mm.
as someone who identifies with that label in some way, it's like, okay, fine. Yes, I do struggle with these things. Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, these are things that yeah, yes. But what am I going to do about it? Ow. What am I going to do? Because
When
otherwise it's just sitting there and not acting. And by not acting, I don't necessarily mean doing anything. Sometimes the action of doing nothing is in itself an action, but there's just so like it's as if they're in a bubble.
mm. when I so using a practical example, I was listening to the conversation between Justin Sung and something Scott, and they were talking about the argument, confliction, this backwards and forwards between direct instruction and inquiry-based learning, which is again a really vague concept. Inquiry, but what does that mean? Asking questions. What sort of questions? When do you ask the questions? Who asks the questions? What questions do you ask? It's
How
so
many
vague.
questions do you ask?
Exactly. When do you stop? um, and I think it was Scott, said that he's more on the direct instruction side than he perceived Justin Sun to be. And Justin said, oh no, I like the ideas of inquiry-based learning, but the way that they're applied in practice is poor, so I actually lean towards direct instruction. And when I look at the dichotomy between the two, direct instruction is teacher saying, do this thing. Inquiry-based is teacher saying, okay, how would you approach this thing? Right? So one of them is telling them exactly what to do. The other one is giving them a question for them to answer. Both of them, apparently, like looking at it, goes, oh yeah, they're completely different things. But when we look at the constraints-led approach, you could do both of those things with a constraints approach. And that is where I find it difficult to have conversations with these sorts of people from the cognitive view, because direct instruction isn't an approach to learning. It's a thing, it's an action, it's a behavior. And that
It's
behavior,
a thing to do, yeah.
exactly, and that behavior can add or remove constraints. And the same with the inquiry-based learning, it adds or removes constraints. And so when I'm looking at the two techniques, the two approaches, they were saying it's one or the other. And I'm like, no, it's not. They are two different types of constraints you can use as a teacher, as an educator, to change the environment that they're working in. So it's not direct instruction is better or worse, or inquiry based is better or worse, or I lean one way or the other. I don't think that's relevant because it's going to depend on the relationship between the individual and the environment, the organism environment relationship. So both of them are as beneficial as one another, depending on the relationship of the individual that you're teaching, which to me means that these techniques that people talk about, oh, do this technique or do that technique or use this effect, are constraints. They are constraints you can choose to put into place. And the expertise that you would ideally gain from finding out or learning about this information is so that you can refine the environment you're working in. Go, oh, okay, I'm going to add this constraint to try and benefit from the hypercorrection effect. Or I'm going to remove this constraint to try and benefit from the hypercorrection effect. But the hypercorrection effect, if that's something you're looking for, to me, can be a distraction. I
Yeah.
want to get the hypercorrection effect. Why? I want to learn that thing. Okay, go learn that thing. How are you going to do it? I'm going to add a constraint in. The hypercorrection effect is a side thing. I don't quite get the focus on, we need to focus on these effects and phenomena and why they happen. Great. If you want to talk about the theory, great. So when you're creating environments, constrained environments, you could then use that information in the environment to educate what constraints you're going to add or not add. Excuse me. But actually telling the student, go do this thing, go find this whatever effect, whatever phenomena, whatever thing. I don't see the benefit in that. Because to
It,
me, that's overcomplicating the learning environment. Because at the end of the day, and again, this comes back to all of these terms: retrieval practice, active recall, free recall, working memory. No, practice. But just practice the damn thing. Like,
but how, when, where, why?
and that is in itself the constraints-led approach. All of those answers to questions, there isn't an answer. And that's my struggle, which is why I wanted to ask, like, how would you getting back to the question, how would you explain these techniques, these effects, these things that you should do in learning through a constraints-led approach?
I wouldn't explain them.
So
I would
would you
just
not expose them at all?
I would expose them in very certain circumstances, obviously depending on the environment, blah 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 blah. Just
Yeah,
the easy
it
and
depends.
accurate answer. It depends on the person. If I want my kids to do something, I behave very differently. I have different constraints. My son, I will give him tons of information because that is what impassions him and gets him motivated and excited and wanting to try things. My daughter just wants to know, just wants to do something.
So would you say you do less with your son or do more? Because what I'm hearing you say is you're adding in less constraints.
Yeah, there are less constraints. Yeah, absolutely. There are less constraints. And then obviously it's dynamic, so changes. If there is overwhelm, then I add a little bit more. But I start from a much less constrained environment, unless there is something very specific he is trying to achieve.
So do you start or do
Oh,
they
yeah,
start?
they start. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Because when us as educators try and help someone else, I don't think we should go in with constraints.
No.
I think we should look at the organism environment relationship and the information we are being exposed to and not add any constraints until we see complexity or perceive complexity getting in the way of behavior, then
Yeah.
adding constraints because of the goal-directed behavior that they're pursuing to get the thing done.
Mm.
And when I look
I
at it,
don't. So I suppose I don't add constraints to either one until I see that overwhelm, confusion, etc., etc. Then I add a little constraint in. But I think I add less constraints. Well, that's entirely true because it is very much environmentally dependent. So it varies.
so I'm going to guess your daughter for herself adds more constraints in comparison to your son.
Yes, that's probably a little bit. Yeah.
So the environment that you go in, so when you join the environment of your son and his environment, there are typically less imposed constraints by him, so the environment is more complex when
Yes.
compared to your daughter, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So when, as the educator, you go in, obviously you have the two individualized situations. You are, I'm guessing you are probably removing constraints. You're removing your daughter's constraints to help her learn, but you're probably adding constraints to your son to
Yeah.
reduce the complexity.
Yes.
Which to me, when I look at that as an educator, if you're coming from a cognitive lens, direct instruction, putting direct instruction on both of those people, direct instruction is adding constraints, which obviously works for your son. Adding more constraints to your daughter, I can't imagine working very well, but I don't know.
No. No.
Because I can imagine her being like, well, I don't know what to do now. I can't follow the things that she knows.
Mm. Yeah.
So how do you teach your daughter if not direct instruction?
I just follow her.
Yeah, but how do you help her learn? Because you were saying, well, we were theorizing that you reduce the constraints.
How do I help her? I don't know.
Yeah, because my guess, again, this is me guessing here, would be that you ask her questions.
Yeah. Oh, you were actually asking what I actually do.
Yeah, as in like the
Sorry.
actions.
The
Yeah.
practical. I was just like, theoretical theory. Let's think
No, no,
theory.
no, no.
Right.
I'm practiced.
I ask questions. Yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. Why? Often it's why, so that I can gain an understanding of where she is and what she's trying to do. Because that's where I approach things. It's always with a question of why.
So
Because
when she answers those questions, how do you follow up on that?
sometimes it's directed instruction, other times it's another question.
Interesting, because I would imagine with her having more constraints than your son, you asking more questions for her to explore than you would with your son, because your son, I would imagine, already asked those questions.
Yes.
So he's already curious enough to ask those questions. So what you'd want to do is add direct instruction to add the constraint to say, okay, instead of going in all of these directions and trying to figure out the entire world, let's narrow this down a little bit. Whereas
Yeah,
your daughter,
a good example of this is so he has been obviously watching me do a lot of D&D, and he is very creatively driven. He's very good at creative writing, and he's like, I'll make you a world, and I'm like, okay, go for it.
I would imagine your daughter would do something more refined, like looking at a character.
Yeah,
She'll look at a character and like focus in on the character because of the constraints she looks the
yeah.
world through.
And so with Aiden, it's like, okay, cool. I am very happy for you to do that. However, he's playing mate to make a suggestion. And
Let,
just
let,
go, "Hey, let's try not to build the planet. Let's just try to build an area of the planet." And it's interesting navigating over constraining,
Hmm.
if that's even a thing. I suppose it would be.
Well, yeah,
Like
it's
it needs to be,
oversimplification.
yeah, and simplifying it to a point where it's just like just build one map. Yeah, but I want to know how it all connects and all that. And I'm like, okay, cool. You're interested in that part, right? And he was asking specifics about how do I like how do I put NPCs in there? How do I put like characters in the map? I'm like, well, that's not done in the map software. That's done in a Google Doc or in this. And he's been watching me use Obsidian.
Ah.
Then we're in so much trouble.
Get him into Obsidian now. Get him in early.
That would be so cool. Yeah. Sorry, he was listening to the video this morning and going, "That's not you. Is that Grian?" I'm like, "No, no, it's not. I mean, thank you very much, but no." And he was listening to me like, "That isn't you. It can't be." I'm like, "Yes, it is. It is me. I recorded it."
I must admit, a lot of English people do sound the same on recording unless you can see their face. Like, even though, so for those unfamiliar, Grian is a Minecraft YouTube
Mm.
creator. Um, Mumbo and Grian sound different, but a lot of English creators can sound like Grian, can sound like Mumbo, can sound like all of the other Minecraft creators. So they need to make their voice, they need to change the inflections in their voice so it does sound different. Americans, for whatever reason, I don't know whether it's because our bias to the English accent is different, but all Americans sound to me the same. Like, like there is very, it's very hard, even when they change the inflections in their voice, for me to differentiate between voices. If they are naturally similar. I mean, I'm not saying that female American from Texas is going to sound the same as male American from Dakota. Like, no. But if you've got two similar sorts of people from America, it's so difficult for me to differentiate between the two. Whereas in the UK or in England, we can make ourselves sound the same, but we can also make ourselves sound different. And I can identify the differences, but I can't identify the differences in the American voices as easily. And yeah, as I'm saying this, it's probably the attunement and the information that I have available with the accent in England, because obviously that's where I live. But yeah, it's just really interesting.
And it makes sense because as you were saying that, I was like, "Do I have that?" No, I don't. But then a lot of the people I work with are Americans. So I am attuned to different American. Like when I started working, and a lot of my Notion work were with Americans. They were in the US, they were in the States, they were in Canada. So I can tell the difference
I was going to say, can you tell the difference between Americans and Canadians?
some of the time. Not all the time, but
I
some
was
of the
going to say,
time.
I really struggle. I really struggle. But yeah, that was a nice little segue at the end. I mean, it's sort of related to building vaults. It was related to information, related information, and direct instruction, and all those sorts of things, like how you build. But yeah, anything else you want to add? Or actually, before we close it out, when's the video going to go live?
Re-record it today, hopefully before next week,
So this
assuming
evening.
everything goes wrong.
So this evening, yeah.
Yeah, no. I would love it to be this evening.
Yeah. We haven't actually discussed this, but we'll probably take a break for Christmas.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Because obviously, like Christmas is, I think it's Sunday, and then New Year's is like Sunday, and obviously we record over the weekends and families first. So
oh yeah,
the next episode you guys will see or listen to will probably be 2024.
yeah, yeah. So the video will be published by the next episode.
Bloody well, I hope so.
Yeah, so do I.
Oh, right. Until the new year, Happy New Year and Christmas. I recognize it's
Yeah.
early, but obviously we won't hear or see you till then. So